What if heaven and hell weren't just distant destinations we're sent to after death? What if they're already being formed, right here, right now, inside us? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever felt, even for a second, that your daily choices carry eternal weight? That each small action, each silent response of the soul, every yes and every no, is building something greater than just today? This is one of those questions that once it touches your conscience, won't let you rest, not in a bad way, but as a holy invitation to wake up, to pay more attention, to reflect deeply on the life you're living and where, in truth, it's taking you. C.S. Lewis, with his elegant wisdom and unique spiritual insight, challenges us at this exact point. In his works, especially The Great Divorce, he offers a radical perspective. Heaven and hell aren't merely future destinations. They're reflections of the soul. They are states that begin to take shape now, in this very moment, in how we live, love, choose, and respond to life.
It's as if every decision we make leaves an invisible trail, a mark of light or shadow. And over time, that trail becomes a path that leads us closer to the fullness that is God, or toward the emptiness that is His absence. But wait, this isn't just about major decisions or dramatic moments. Lewis shows us that hell begins with small compromises, in the subtle choice to feed a grudge, in the refusal to forgive, in vanity slowly taking control, in pride disguised as self-sufficiency. And in the same way, heaven is revealed in quiet gestures, in the effort to love even when it goes unnoticed, in forgiveness offered without condition, in the sincere humility of someone who knows they need something greater. Have you ever felt that? Felt like you were in a cycle of choices that made you lighter, more at peace, or the opposite, in a spiral of attitudes that emptied you inside, even when everything on the outside seemed fine? Maybe you didn't have the words for it, but you knew that something sacred or something dark was growing inside of you. Lewis doesn't speak of hell as a place of literal flames, but as a prison of the self, where desires become distorted, where the ego feeds on illusion, where the soul drifts so far from reality it can no longer see the light. Its pride hardened into blindness, the refusal to see truth even when it stands right before your eyes. And heaven? Heaven for Lewis is everything that becomes possible when the soul finally surrenders to true love. Not a vague or romantic love, but a love with form, with color, with a name. The love that comes from God. To be in heaven is to be in God, to be completely filled by His living, powerful, transforming presence. But for that to happen, we must open ourselves. We must allow ourselves to be shaped, redeemed, transformed.
So now think, how have you been living your days? I'm not talking about major sins or heroic virtues. I'm talking about your inner conversations, your hidden thoughts, the emotions you nurture in silence. Because that's where it all begins. That's where heaven and hell are being formed. What you're about to discover may surprise you, because the truth is, there are no shortcuts. There's no such thing as "I'll deal with that later." Heaven and hell aren't choices we make only at the moment of death. They are paths we begin to walk while we are still breathing. C.S. Lewis invites us to look inward with courage and honesty. He shows us that spiritual decisions aren't just theoretical or religious in the traditional sense. They're real, they're concrete. They happen in how we deal with pain, with pleasure, with time, with others, even with the silence of God. Stay with me until the end, because we'll still explore how these ideas unfold in everyday life. We're going to unpack what it really means to live heaven here on earth, and how hell can begin in the lies we tell ourselves. And most importantly, how grace is always waiting, ready to transform even the most lost soul. Maybe something here resonates with you. Maybe a word reminded you of a choice you made recently, or something you've been avoiding. If that happens, don't ignore it. Feel it. Write it down. Share in the comments if you'd like. Because, yes, every person who comments here helps keep this conversation alive, and this conversation is bigger than us. If this message is touching you somehow, if it makes sense to you, hold on, because what comes next will take us even deeper into this journey that, deep down, we're all walking, even if we don't realize it. After all, what kind of eternity are you building today with today's choices? And when we begin to see heaven and hell not as distant places, but as inner landscapes we cultivate right here and now, everything changes. You can't live on autopilot anymore, dragging yourself through the days, treating your soul like an afterthought. Every choice we make carries eternal weight. Every thought we feed, every gesture of forgiveness or indifference, every yes or no we offer to life, all of it is shaping the kind of person we're becoming. And more than that, it's either drawing us closer to heaven or sinking us into a hell that's already taking shape inside. C.S. Lewis saw this with disarming clarity. He didn't speak of heaven as fluffy clouds and angels playing harps, nor of hell as a cartoon of flames and pitchforks. He spoke of states of the soul, a kind of reality that begins to unfold when we choose to love, serve, forgive. Or on the other hand, when we feed selfishness, pride, and indifference. And the scariest part?
Most of the time, we drift into darkness through a series of small, unnoticed decisions. So right here, at this point in the video, I want to invite you to pause. Not the content, but within yourself. Does what we're reflecting on make sense to you? Have you ever felt that at certain moments in life, you were living closer to heaven or maybe trapped in a kind of emotional, spiritual, internal hell? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Seriously, share. Your story might light the way for someone else who's walking through the exact same thing. And if this content has touched something inside you, if these words brought clarity, comfort, or even discomfort, because sometimes discomfort is what wakes us up, then I ask you, click like. It's not just a button. It's a way of saying, this conversation matters, that it's worth continuing. And of course, if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, join us. Be part of this community that's growing, hungry for meaning, depth, and truth. Subscribe, turn on notifications. Here, we'll keep exploring these spiritual truths with our feet on the ground and hearts pointed toward heaven. Your presence here makes all the difference, truly. This channel only makes sense because there are people like you on the other side, willing to reflect, to question, and to be transformed. Thank you for staying with me so far. And now, back to what we were saying. C.S. Lewis wasn't a theologian by profession. He didn't spend his life in monasteries, nor did he write doctrinal treatises for closed religious circles. He was a man who experienced deep losses, who lived through war, who faced such intense doubts that he declared himself an atheist for part of his life. But it was precisely because he stared into that inner abyss that his words carry so much truth. Lewis didn't write from the top of a theological tower. He wrote from the trenches, from pain, from God's silence, and even so, from the light that breaks through even the darkest night. That's why millions of people, even those who claim not to believe, find in his words something that pulses with life. Because Lewis spoke of faith as someone who knew what it was to live without it. Now, I want to go even deeper, because understanding his view of heaven and hell isn't just a theological journey. It's a mirror for our own soul. For Lewis, heaven was not merely a destination after death, but the fullest blossoming of the human identity. Heaven, he said, is the place where we become truly ourselves, not an escape from reality, but the revelation of the most solid and profound reality, the one we were created for, but have almost forgotten how to reach. According to him, the soul that enters heaven isn't a perfect soul. It's a redeemed soul, a soul that allowed itself to be shaped, a soul that learned to love.
A soul that let pride be broken so that grace could take its place. And that changes everything. Because it takes us out of the passive position of someone who just waits for the end and invites us to live a life already under construction. Heaven, in Lewis's perspective, doesn't begin when we die. It begins when we surrender. When we decide, quietly, daily, to align our hearts with what is eternal. And if that vision is as beautiful as it is unsettling, wait until you see what Lewis said about hell. Because he never described hell as a dungeon where souls scream while God watches from afar. No, the image he offers is far more disturbing and, paradoxically, more just. To Lewis, hell is the continuation of our choices. It is the place or the state where the soul locks the door from the inside. He said, in the end, there are only two kinds of people, those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says, "Very well then, thy will be done." Do you feel the weight of that? Hell, in his view, isn't imposed, it's permitted. Permitted by a God who respects our freedom, even to its most painful consequences. And that brings us to a question that burns in the conscience. What am I building inside myself today? Because if heaven is the result of a heart that loves, forgives, and surrenders, then hell is the reflection of an ego that refuses to bow. Then the future isn't just about time, but about what we are carrying right now. Resentment is not neutral. Pride isn't just a personality trait. Vanity, bitterness, coldness, they are embers we ignite within. And if we insist on keeping them alive, what will be left of us in the end? But there is another side, the side of seeds, because love, even in the smallest actions, already carries the scent of heaven. A quiet gratitude, a difficult surrender,
the choice to forgive even while the wound still burns. These small decisions, invisible to the world, are the bricks of an eternity that begins within. Lewis calls our attention to this with rare sensitivity. He helps us realize that every gesture matters, every thought shapes us, every small, ordinary decision points our soul in a direction, toward light or toward darkness. And to make all of this even clearer, Lewis used imagery, poetic, symbolic metaphors that spoke directly to our imagination and to our fears. In his book, The Great Divorce, he describes souls that have the chance to enter heaven but refuse. Why? Because they don't want to let go of what still holds them. Vanities, addictions, attachments. One of the most powerful images is of a man carrying a lizard on his shoulder. The lizard represents a desire, a sinning, a pride. To enter heaven, he must let the lizard die. But he hesitates, he bargains, he fears losing a part of himself. And do you understand how deep that goes?
How many things are we carrying with us today, even knowing they don't belong in heaven? Now I want to go even further into this, because when Lewis says that hell has a door locked from the inside, he's showing us that God never abandons us, but we often choose to stay far from Him, and not without reason. Sometimes because of pride, sometimes because of wounds we fed for so long they become part of our identity, and other times because we don't want to change the story we tell ourselves, because admitting that God is right requires admitting that maybe we've been living wrong, and that's a painful truth to face. But the truth is, grace is there, present, accessible, waiting, not to control us, but to set us free. God doesn't force salvation down our throats. He offers it. He waits. He whispers to the heart, but He never kicks the door down. That is both terrifying and beautiful, because eternity then is not about punishment, but about consequence. A consequence built brick by brick in the choices we make in the quiet of our daily life. When Lewis spoke of heaven and hell, it wasn't to scare us, quite the opposite. He wanted us to see more clearly the signs that are already within us. You know that moment when you feel a heavy weight, even though no one saw what you did? Or when, even surrounded by people, you feel a deep loneliness inside? Those were signs, echoes, fragments of a soul that is either moving toward light or drifting from something sacred. Lewis believed that heaven begins when the soul bows, not out of fear, but out of love. When we stop resisting the light and allow ourselves to be transformed by it. And that transformation doesn't happen in a grand spiritual explosion. It happens in the ordinary, in the hidden, in the detail. It happens when we forgive someone who never asked for forgiveness. When we say no to the pride that wants to win the argument. When we choose truth even when it hurts. When we prefer to love rather than be right. Heaven, according to Lewis, is that silent place where decisions begin to align with eternity.
But what about hell? What is this place so feared that has haunted imaginations for centuries? To Lewis, hell is not the result of a cruel God who punishes with fire and brimstone. It is the reflection of a soul that chooses to live centered on itself. A soul that does not want to be saved because being saved means dying to self. Hell, he says, is not an imposed prison. It is a chosen isolation, a loneliness built brick by brick with resentment, pride, and self-sufficiency. And here comes one of the most unsettling ideas of all. Hell doesn't begin after death. It begins when we live as if truth were optional. When we become incapable of loving because we are chained to a wound we refuse to release. When we rather be in control than live in freedom.
Lewis shows us that the sparks of hell ignite when we feed what's killing us, even if no one else sees it. That's why he used so many vivid images to help us see. In The Great Divorce, he describes souls invited to heaven, but who refuse to enter, not because they're blocked, but because they won't let go of what they love more than truth. One of the most striking moments is when a man carries a lizard, a symbol of his distorted desires, on his back. He's invited into heaven, but first the lizard must die. And he hesitates. It hurts too much. The attachment is strong. What he doesn't know is that the lizard isn't life, it's prison. How many times are we the same, clinging to habits, relationships, thoughts, and wounds that have long lost their purpose, but have become part of our identity? And so we fear letting go, because we don't know who we'd be without them. But Lewis points out, until we let die what separates us from the light, we will never be truly free. Because heaven is not compatible with masks, or with vanity, or with self-justification. And that is the beauty and the terror of freedom. God doesn't impose his presence. He invites. He waits. He knocks, but it doesn't force his way in. The door, as Lewis says, is locked from the inside. Hell is where the soul shuts itself in, and heaven is where it surrenders. But that surrender doesn't happen only in the big moments of life. It unfolds in small, almost imperceptible choices, when we look within before pointing out someone else's flaw. Only pray, not to demand, but to listen. When we admit, today my pride spoke louder, but I don't want to feed it anymore. These small decisions are seeds. They grow quietly and shape the place we will inhabit, not only after death, but here now, inside our very chest. Because if there's one thing C.S. Lewis made clear, it's this: eternity doesn't begin in another dimension. It begins when we choose which truth we will walk with. The truth is, many of us carry day after day embers that feed hell. Angry thoughts we never voiced but nourished. Jealousy dressed up as innocent comparison. Silent judgments that hardened the heart. But there are also seeds of heaven in every day. The hug we gave even while tired. The apology that swallowed our pride. The gratitude for something simple like a sunset or a warm meal. But the problem is we often give more attention to what burns than to what heals. And so the burning question becomes, what are you cultivating inside yourself? Because you may appear fine on the outside,
upright, moral, even religious, but be at war within, trapped in a maze of pain, pride, and inner battles. And God doesn't look at appearances. He sees the bad stage. He sees the intentions. He sees the price no one else sees. And it's exactly there that heaven begins. Or hell.
Lewis never wrote like someone pointing fingers. He wrote like someone searching, too. Someone who had once stood on the outside, wondering where God was, in the pain, the silence, and the doubts. He knew faith doesn't always come easy, that there are days when we feel nothing, moments when prayer feels like speaking to the ceiling. And still, he chose to keep going, because he understood that the soul's journey is shaped more by decisions than by emotions. And if you stop to think, how many of our best decisions were made in the dark, in silence, with trembling, but they changed everything. The day we forgave someone who didn't ask for it, the moment we admitted a hard but necessary truth, the night we wept and whispered, "I don't understand, but I trust." That's where heaven begins, not in immediate answers, but in the willingness to walk without a map. And perhaps this is one of the deepest truths Lewis ever revealed. It's not God who excludes us. We're the ones who often choose to live locked inside ourselves. We hold on to bitterness because it gives us a sense of control. We avoid truth because it demands change. We resist love because love demands that the self die. And the soul that refuses to die to itself cannot enter heaven, not because it was rejected, but because it never wanted to enter. So the question is no longer, will God accept me? But rather, am I willing to be transformed? Because entering heaven isn't about crossing golden gates. It's allowing God to cross the gates of our pride. It's letting Him break down the defenses we built to avoid being hurt. It's giving up being right to gain peace. Comment below, I'm on this journey too. And if at any point in this video something awakened in you, a memory, a reflection, a longing to live with more awareness of the eternity that begins now, that it was worth walking this road together. If this message spoke to you, leave a comment saying, I'm with you till the end. It helps me understand how far this conversation reached you and encourages me to keep creating content that really matters for your journey. Like this video, because when you do, the platform understands that this kind of content matters, and that helps it reach more people who might need this same conversation today. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This space exists so we can grow together, day by day, reflecting, learning, and drawing closer to what really matters. Your presence here brings this community to life. And hey, there's a video right here that continues everything we've talked about today. Click it and keep walking with me there. There's more waiting for you.